can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your work?
So, I'm disabled in a number of ways, and I was born disabled. So I've always written about disabled characters, often without realizing I was. I've been writing since I was very little. And so I write a lot of fantasy, a lot of urban fantasy, a lot of short stories, basically whatever comes to mind. Recently I've been working on a web novel, which is posted online, and a novel that's accompanying it, both with a lot of disabled characters, a lot of people of color, a lot of queer characters. Trauma in particular shows up a lot, because what's the fun of writing if you can't project your problems all over it? So that's what I've been working on.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you feel about the representation, current and historical, of disabled and or multiply marginalized people in the media and in fiction?
So disability in particular is very hard to track, because we have the problem where the physical disabilities, when we see them, often the representations are awful. Like, there's a very, very long history of it being used to signify certain traits, certain personalities, being used as a shorthand. But then we also have an erasure going on of other disabilities. And so, when not talking about historical representation, we have to go on a bit of a scavenger hunt, where when we look at things like changeling stories that are being told a lot in the medieval settings, you have to unpack it and go, but what are they actually talking about? Or Hephaestus in Greek mythology. If you have a god with a severe limp and a broken back, maybe that says something about that being present in Greek society. But again, you have to search for it in very different ways than you do for a lot of other representation.
So you would say it's not very present?
Yeah, and when it is, it's hidden under a lot of layers. I run into the problem where when I do point it out, people think I'm reaching. And it's like, well, we've always been around. Disability didn't spring into existence. It's there. It's very interesting, especially if you're working with historical stuff. There's a sense of you're not just writing new things into existence. It's a process of discovery. You're bringing this history that's been hidden out into the light.
So when did you hear about the anthology, and how did you feel about it?
So, I'm a big nerd, and I follow everyone from CanCon on Twitter. So I've been following Kat and Talia for a while, and so I heard about the anthology basically from its conception, and so there was a lot of me sorting through ideas, going, I want to impress them, which is somewhat embarrassing to admit, but I hope charming as well. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm going for. And it was definitely nerve-wracking submitting and going, oh my god, I've met them. I hope I don't. Oh god. But that's how I heard about it, and it was very much like, oh, yes, this is something you're interested in. I'm very professional. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, what made you decide to submit to it?
Other than the
fandom,
I mentioned fanboying over Kat and Talia, it was, like I said, I write about disability a lot, but one problem I have is that when I do write about disability, one, it's not my own. Or two, when it is my own, it's my brain stuff. It's autism and PTSD. It's those things. But the first thing people ever notice about me is that I'm deaf, and I don't know why I've had such a hard time writing about it. I think it's a lot of internalized stuff around, oh, well, nobody wants to read a story where you have to stop and ask for clarification every 5 seconds. That just slows things down. You never would have gotten to Mount Doom if you couldn't hear the directions. For this anthology, because because it's encouraged, because it's invited to write about disability, I finally felt like I had a window to actually face that head on and go, okay, stop running away from this, actually write about being deaf and unpack some of the problems you have around that, because you're 23, you've been doing that for 2 decades. The title of mine is Oliver Gutierrez and the Walking Stick of Destiny. Despite the title, it is not an epic fantasy. I was really tired and couldn't come up with a title. And so I was like, oh, I'll call it this. And my girlfriend was like, that's hilarious, please call it that. And I'm going, I'm sure they'll change it if they accept it. And I'm probably not going to get that accepted anyway. I sent it in. And next thing I know, it got accepted. So that's the first thing you need to know about the story, is that the title is not, it's not entirely indicative, but it is very accurate to the main character. The story is very autobiographical to a very specific point in my life, and it's imbued with magical realism, which is my favorite genre. But the idea being, I've always talked to objects in my life. I've always personified the things that were important to me, and some of that comes from being lonely. Some of that comes from being, creative, and what's that trope called again? Manic pixie dream girl. And then, the realization several years later, oh, I guess the manic part of that was right. Okay. And so that was something I really wanted to write about, because with that kind of thing, your relationship to disability aids and the things that you need to make it around changes. I name my instruments. I haven't actually named my hearing aids, but that's because they're very much part of me rather than separate. I've named my cane. I've named. Once you name something, then you can depend on it more. It will be there to support you, and it'll be there to support you because you own it, whatever. But the emotional side of it is there. So that's getting into thematic stuff, but my story is a pretentious one.
So my last question is, where can we connect with you and your work?
So currently I have an author's website, elliottdunstan.com. Nobody ever spelled my name right on the first go, but it is spelled as it is on the table of contents, which I've also made sure they spelled it right on. I say with love. And so my web novel is hosted on there, as well as a couple short stories. I've been published in a couple online journals, stuff like that. And I link them all on there, because that's the appropriate thing to do. Read my work. So those are the main places. And my web novel is part of a larger universe we're putting together. So if you're interested in that, that's also a place to poke around. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Fiction about disability. Please come talk to us.